Hello everybody and welcome to this new episode of Books Up Close. My name is Chris Lloyd. Today we are talking about Second Place by Rachel Cusk, which came out this year. So it's a book I only just finished and am still mulling over because I'm really not sure how I felt about it. It's only just over 200 pages, but it took me a while to get through actually, and I didn't feel immediately warm to it. I didn't settle into it in the way I usually get sucked into Cusk books. I'm a fan of some of her earlier stuff, and especially the Outline trilogy, as well as some of her non-fiction, which I think is much better than people say. They often cast it as this kind of cold, clinical look at her ex-husband or her kids or people she lived with. But actually I think she's doing something far more interesting in those books. But especially after the Outline trilogy, which seemed to push the novel form to a very new place. It really kind of asked what novels are, what they're supposed to do, how we think about character and interiority and narrative and all these things. I think it's quite hard to do the next novel after you've just kind of written this trilogy of books that seem to suggest what the novel has already done is kind of lost its way, or that actually we need to think of new forms as the novel has always been, right? The novel has always been multiple things, but like that trilogy really seemed to suggest a way forward for thinking about what character is, why we go to books in the 21st century. So this book seems like a very odd kind of follow-up to that. So it starts with this character M, who is narrating something to a character called Jeffers, who we never know who that is. We don't get any sense of who they are. And the narrator basically takes us through the story of inviting an artist called L to this kind of second home that they have. So M lives on a marshland coastline with her husband, and they have this separate house kind of further along the coast, which they let people come and stay in, usually artists, writers, painters, that kind of thing. And L is a very famous painter whose work that M sees one day in Paris, and she's kind of drawn into it. And she writes in a letter and says, if you ever want somewhere to be, you could come to this house, the second place, as they call it. From there, the story spills out that Elle eventually comes to this place, but he brings a young woman called Brett, who immediately rubs M up the wrong way. She's this young, prolific, sexy woman who clearly has Elle's affections, but she's also very she forces herself into situations, so she gets too close to people, literally. She's kind of right up in M's face quite often, in ways that M doesn't like. She then kind of takes M's daughter under her wing, and the whole book really is M's way of trying to pass out the effect that Elle and Brett has on her kind of small domestic world. It's the very few characters, and by domestic world I mean that in the sense of the kind of this house space and the various interactions between M and her husband, then M and her grown-up daughter and the daughter's boyfriend, and then this other two characters that come in from outside. So really it's a very minute little drama set in this very strange landscape of tides coming in and out, strange kind of sea formations, the sky, the forest. Now, to me, lots of reviews have kind of noted the voice of this narrator who's talking to Jeffers. The narrator often has lots of exclamation marks. There's a very particular tone to the voice, but to me it feels like other Cusk narrators. And people usually then make the jump and say it's Cusk herself, but I don't want to go that far. But it does sound, just in the way that kind of the sentences are written, the grammar, the way that thoughts are formulated, sounds like most of Cusk's other narrators, which I find quite interesting. I don't see that as a flaw necessarily, but I find it interesting because everyone's kind of talking about these exclamation marks as though these kind of weird typographical interruptions in Cusk's usual cool prose. But if you've read Zadie Smith, you've seen exclamation marks a lot. I don't think they're that exciting or different. It doesn't cover up the fact that this voice sounds very Cuskian, if that is a word now. But really at the crux of this, I didn't feel connected to anyone in the book. I didn't quite care about the drama that M and Elle were living out. There's some strange relation between M as a writer of little books and Elle, this kind of dominant masculine painter. It seems to replay what Cusk is really interested in, which is a kind of gender war storyline, which strangely or interestingly in Cusk is usually about maleness and femaleness. I worry a little bit that Cusk is quite a binary thinker in terms of sex, and she always sees femaleness and maleness in her books. You notice this in all of them when you read them back to back, that femaleness is articulated quite often as something very specific and almost biological, and the drama between men and women plays out in a very kind of binary way over and over again. And in this book, it's about this kind of tortured, aloof artist who is a man, and this woman who he doesn't want to paint initially because he doesn't find it interesting, and eventually he says he wants to destroy her. And this whole kind of drama is playing out, and it's odd, it doesn't fully make sense. I don't understand why everyone is behaving in these ways. It's a very oddly claustrophobic book, but not in a good way, I don't think. But then when we get to the end, there is a little postscript kind of thing, which is a dedication, and I don't want to say what that is now because I think you need to get to it at the end of the book. I don't like the reviews that have actually foregrounded it, because I think it might change the way you read it. But Cusk makes reference to another text that she is engaging with and is kind of rewriting or reimagining, and that really might change the way you read this, although for me, I don't know what it adds. It confuses things more than anything else. So in short, there are some interesting things in this book. There are always, as ever with Cusk, some beautiful sentences that kind of cut right to the heart of things. She's really good at those. But I ultimately didn't fully care, which is a problem, I think. The Outline trilogy made us care because we were trying to figure out who Faye was, right? She's this kind of blank centre around which all these people were talking. And the more that other people talked, the more we got a sense of who Faye was. And they were books very much interested in narrative, in the process of telling stories, of why we listen to others. And that to me is kind of fascinating. But this book, in its reflections on writing and art and gender, really, I don't know what that added, what we got new. So sadly, I'm only going to give this 3 out of 5 because I don't think it's the best Cusk by far. And I'm not entirely sure I bought the entire setup, even though it's like referencing this other thing, which we don't want to talk about. But if you like Cusk, it's definitely worth reading to kind of see her trajectory of writing. But if you haven't read Cusk before, I would not suggest this is the first thing to read. Go straight to Outline and go from there. But as ever, if you've read this book, please do let me know what you think below. I really want to know what you think. I've read some reviews and they're all kind of all over the place. So I want to hear from you because you always have really useful thoughts. So please do like this video, share it with friends, please comment below, and please subscribe and ring the bell for notifications if you haven't done already. And until next time, happy reading, look after yourselves, and stay well.